Hi everyone, welcome to the Bagmaker's Workroom. I'm Chris. Today is a really special episode because we're going to talk about tips and tricks. All those little things that I've learned over the years that help make the job easier. Sometimes we have problems with little things, and I have just tried to find ways to make that a simpler process. So I'm going to share those with you today, but before we do, I want to welcome you to my workroom. Okay, this first tip has to do with turning pockets. So a lot of times we take a piece of fabric, we fold it in half, we stitch up both sides, and then we need to turn this so that we can make it a slip pocket in our bag. Well, we've been taught to cut these corners, to clip the corners so that we get a nice crisp edge. But I have a better way. If you take this seam, the side seam, and you fold it, you just fold the fabric right along your stitching line. I'm going to stick my thumb in here and use my forefinger to hold that down. All you have to do is pop it out. And I'm going to use my turning tool and just push on that just a little bit. I'm going to get a nice crisp corner. Okay, so I'm going to do that one more time. I'm going to just fold it along my stitch line, stick my thumb in there and hold it down with my finger, and just take it, and you almost don't even need to stick your turning tool in there. You can poke it out with your finger. But I'm going to just stick that ball in there and push it out a little bit. And now when you go to the iron and press this, you are going to have absolutely perfect corners without cutting anything. So let's say you don't fold the fabric. Let's say you actually have two seams. So in this case, I sewed pocket together. Here's the bottom, here's the side. I didn't stitch this side, but I just wanted to show you how to do this if you have two seams. So in that case, you're going to fold the fabric twice. So I'm going to fold it on this stitch line, and then I'm also going to fold it in the same direction on this stitch line. So now I have it folded twice. I'm going to stick my thumb in there, use my finger to hold it, and then I'm just going to turn and I'm going to pop it out. If I need to stick my turning tool in there, I can, just to kind of give it a final little push. A lot of times you don't really even need to have to do that. And now I have a perfect corner. So what if you don't have a right angle? Let's say you have something like this, where you have an angle going up. How do you do that? You do exactly the same way. You fold on your stitch lines. So I'm just going to fold here. I'm going to fold this one down as well, right on the stitch line. Just use your stitch line as your fold line. Stick my thumb, my finger, and you see I'm just going to hold that down right there. And then I'm just going to turn this and pop it out. And that's without even putting a turning tool in there. Look at that. I can stick it in there if I want to. But once you go press this, you can have a perfect corner. So that is how you get perfect corners on slip pockets. The next trick that I want to show you has to do with turning corners. So a lot of times when we sew, and this is an example just as a zipper pocket overlay, you have to stitch up to the corner, you have to turn and then stitch this way and turn and stitch. Of course, you're turning, you're keeping your needle in and you're turning in the other direction. But how do you know exactly where to stop and turn? So what I do, and you can measure this or you can eyeball it. Sometimes eyeballing it is just as good. I'm going to take, and you're going to use a disappearing pen, not a Sharpie. And I'm just going to put a little dot right in the corner, right where I want to turn. I'm going to do it in each of the four corners. And now I know that no matter which direction I'm stitching in, when I get to that dot, I want to make sure my needle goes down exactly in that dot. Once it does, I can turn and come in the other direction, and I'm going to have a perfectly stitched corner. That dot just helps me know exactly where to turn. Here's a situation where we have a bag. This is going to simulate the corner of a bag. And now we have to put a gusset on. And gussets can be intimidating in the beginning. I was not good at gussets when I first started. It's something that takes some practice. But what you need to always remember is when you're doing this, you have to clip your straight edge. So in this case, the straight edge is the gusset, not the bag. The bag has a curved edge. You're going to actually clip your straight edge. So you're going to line up the top of the bag. You're going to line up the other side. I'm just going to pretend this is a full bag. And as you see, this is not going to meet the edge and it's not going to lay flat. So we want to put little clips in this section here. You don't want to make big clips. If this is a 1/2 inch seam allowance, you only want to go in about 1/4 inch. So there's no rhyme or reason. You don't have to measure. You don't have to be precise with this. Just don't go too deep. And once I do that, I can take this and push it and see how easy that fits in. It goes right in. And then you just go ahead and clip it, and then you can sew. You always want to sew from your gusset side as well. That'll help you. But look at how nice that fits in, just by putting a few little clips. Okay, this next tip has to do with pattern pieces. So we talked about pattern pieces and how a lot of times if you're going to make a pattern several times, you want to get an acrylic template. But what if the pattern doesn't have an acrylic template? Or what if acrylic templates are just not in your budget? What I do is I go get some poster board at the dollar store or Walmart or wherever you can find it. And it doesn't matter what color. And I take the pattern pieces and I glue them to the poster board using a glue stick. Just an Elmer's glue stick. And I put the glue on and I put the pattern piece on and I just kind of let it dry. Then I cut out the pattern piece. So now I've got a nice sturdy pattern piece, and even though it's not an acrylic template, when you use a rotary cutter against it, it does give it a little bit of an edge and helps cut around curves and or straight lines. Of course, we talked about the curve ruler in an earlier episode. But overall, just having this on your patterns makes the patterns last a little bit longer and just gives it a little bit of stability that you need. Let's say we have a beautiful piece of faux like the one here, and we have something we want to line up right in the center. But we don't have an acrylic template, and we have a pattern piece that has been printed on paper, so we can't see where that is. So what I do is I use my ruler and I use the pattern piece to help me line up. So the first thing I'm going to do is fold my pattern piece in half. Okay. Then I'm going to take a ruler, and it doesn't matter what kind of ruler, I'm just going to use this one, and I'm going to find the center of the motif, whatever it is that I want centered. So I'm just going to, I can see here there's a little bit of line through this faux alligator, and I'm just going to line that up right on the center line. Then I'll be able to take my pattern piece and put it right against that ruler and put a few clips in place. So I'm just going to clip. Now I know that it's in place and it's not going to move. When I take my ruler away, I can go ahead and clip the other side, and then I can cut along this, and I know that my design, whatever it is that I wanted, is right in the middle of my pattern. Okay, one of the things that I hear about a lot is when you make a pouch or a bag, how do you make sure that the edges don't cave in if you have a zipper on the top. This bag is a good example of that. There's a zipper on the top and my edges here are straight. They're not caving in. So the reason why and how you do that is you have zipper tabs. So you see the zipper doesn't go all the way to the end. Instead, I have these two little tabs on both sides. So I'm going to show you how to do that. It's going to make all the difference in your project. So I have just a little pouch here that I cut out, and what you want to do is make sure that your zipper is a 1/2 inch smaller on each side. So basically your zipper needs to be at least 1 inch shorter than the top of your bag. You're going to make sure your zipper pull is on, and you're going to take and you're going to cut 2 little pieces of scrap. Doesn't have to be anything specific size. And you're going to sew them right sides together along the very edge. You're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you're just going to stitch both of these on. Okay, so I have them both stitched on, and now I'm going to take and fold this over, making sure my seam allowance is going towards the edge of the tab, and then fold the tab right around the seam allowance, just like this. And I'm going to top stitch right on that tab. Okay, once the top stitching is done, you can go ahead and cut off any excess in the back. And even up the sides. Okay, from here, you want to go ahead and put your zipper centered on the bag. Now, you can go ahead and mark your centers if that makes it easier. This is a scrap piece of zipper, so you see I have this off-center mark, so I'm just going to go ahead and remark the center. I'm going to use a little bit of 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape to hold this down. Now I'm just going to go ahead and put the tape, not necessarily going to go all the way to the end. And I'm going to take the center of the zipper and line it up with the center mark here and just lay this down. Don't pull on your zipper, kind of like your strap. Don't pull on your zipper, don't pull on your strap, don't pull on anything. Let it lay where it wants to. Okay? So from here, go ahead and take your lining piece. We're going to put some tape on that as well. You can go all the way across the top with this. And now we're going to lay that right on top. You want to make sure all of your edges meet. Now we're going to go to the machine, and I'm going to sew this from end to end using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so using a 1/4 inch seam allowance, I sewed that, and then I opened this up, and pulling my lining away from the main fabric, I top stitched the bag. Now my seam allowance is going towards the main part of the bag. Okay, so this is what we have so far. So all we're going to do is we're going to fold our lining down. If you want to hit this with the iron, you certainly can. Just don't hit your faux or your vinyl if you're using it. And we're going to repeat the process for the other side. Okay, so we now have a bag that has our 2 main pieces. They're both top stitched from end to end. The linings are not included in the top stitching. I'm just going to finger press these linings down, but again, you could certainly take it to the iron. And here's where all the tips and tricks come in. You want to start out by taking the 2 folded edges of your main fabric, and you want to put those together. When you do, these zipper tabs are going to go to the lining, and that's what you want. So I'm going to clip that in place right there. I want to make sure those 2 match up. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Just going to squeeze that down Make sure those two match up, put a clip. Okay, now from here, I'm going to clip the rest of the bag. Now, when I stitch this, make sure I line this up. Nothing says that I have to start down here and go up, or start down here. So I'm going to start at the place that I want to make sure lines up perfectly, and that's right here at this point. I'm going to bring this over to my machine. I'm going to put my needle down right at that point where these two edges meet, and then I'm going to stitch down and backstitch. I'm going to turn this around and I'm going to do the same thing. And then I'm going to sew the bottom, and then where I started stitching on both sides, I will stitch down to the bottom and a little bit here and leave an opening to turn. When you stitch these sides, you're not going to be stitching over the zipper at all. So if you look in here, you will see that that zipper tab is way down in there. I'm going to be stitching next to it, not on top of it. Okay, in addition to stitching the sides, I went ahead and boxed the corners. So now when we turn this out, so as you turn these, just put your finger in there and push it up. A lot of times I use my turning tool to help me with that. And also, there's going to be a little hole here because you stitch next to your tab, not on top of it. I'll stick my turning tool in there and kind of push that out as well. You want to do that on both sides. And then once you're through, you will have a pouch with no sides caving in. So I hope you enjoyed all those little tips and tricks, and I hope you had an aha moment during them. If you have a good tip or trick, go ahead and leave it in the comments below. That's how we all learn, is from each other and all of the good ideas and the little things we come up with along the way. So next time we're going to talk about pricing. So we have our workroom, we have our equipment, and now we want to sell bags. How do we do that? How do we price them? So until then, happy sewing.